and millimeter wave experiments a number of years ago that gave somewhat of an indication of what can be done with phenyl radical. And I'll move on to our current research that has been sort of wrapping up as of late. We've measured some millimeter wave spectra using isotopic substitution and are able to determine structure determination. Lastly, I'll go over a brief indication of what we plan to do in the future on phenyl radical and other radicals. Just to give you an idea of its importance, this is a paper by Barney Ellison, shown here. I'd like to quote, Barney's difficult to top in words, but he says, benzene is the most perfect aromatic compound because benzene is so stable, the radical derived from C6H6 by cleavage of the CH bond is a reactive species. If benzene is the prototypical aromatic species that is encountered in many areas of pure chemistry, combustion chemistry, environmental chemistry, and biochemical problems, then the C6H5 radical is an equally fundamental molecule. Now, if you know Barney, this next picture might be a little funny. Barney likes to describe benzene as a loving Christian embrace among the atoms, and I think this kind of shows what he's getting at. Is he in the picture? I think he's in the back. Now, another paper that highlights the importance, this one by David Nesbitt, quotes that phenyl radical, which is the one shown in the picture here, is the product of homolytic CH bond cleavage in benzene and is arguably one of the most fundamental aromatic hydrocarbon radical species in all of chemistry. Of course, we've discussed today earlier, you've heard talks regarding combustion. Because you have this small electron delocalization because of the aromatic character that's left in phenyl radical, you have the resonance stabilization. This means that the molecule is able to participate in other reactions. It also means that it's a crucial intermediate in complex processes such as combustion and soot formation. Now, phenyl has also been proposed as an intermediate in PAH formation and destruction in these combustion processes. As for its interstellar relevance, phenyl may play an important role in the interstellar and circumstellar chemistry. That's been established. It's a possible progenitor of other aromatic species, and it's been believed to be a first aromatic radical formed along the reaction pathway by some people. There have been mechanisms such as the Haka mechanism, which was discussed by Ralph earlier. He mentioned this is good to form small pHs, but other gas phase reactions of phenyl with hydrocarbon, which he showed, are the barrier-less and single collision ones that are important to pH formation in the interstellar medium. And, of course, the importance of phenyl radical in the interstellar medium. As for experiments, some of the early experiments were electron spin resonance. Those provided the symmetry, the ground electronic state, and also established that the unpaired electron resides in a non-bonding sigma-type orbital at the radical carbon. Other experiments have been conducted in the UV, visible, and Raman. Those that are most pertinent to the talk today are those regarding the infrared. There were some early low-resolution matrix studies by Pacansky et al., but most recently there have been up-to-date measurements by Barney Ellison, as I mentioned earlier. He measured 6 isotopomers, including deuterated species, and Nesbitt et al. Measured, these were matrix isolated. Nesbitt et al. Was the first high-resolution gas phase measurement that did some IR spectroscopy for vibrational stretches. Kinetic studies that have been carried out in the cavity, ring down, laser flash photolysis, and cross beam have measured the reactivity. As I mentioned, a radical is very reactive. The reactivity was measured with O2 for combustion, ethylene, methane, benzene, and so forth, including some atmospheric species and the ones that Ralph has discussed earlier, the methylacetylene, vinyl acetylene, to form pHs in other environments, such as the interstellar medium. There have also been radio measurements, which I'll discuss in more detail in just a short bit. Just to give you some stats on phenyl radical, this is the structure shown here, sort of just two-dimensional, low resolution in some case. It's a doublet A, one's electronic ground state. This was, of course, determined by the electron spin resonance measurements. It's an asymmetric rotor with C2V symmetry. Its principal axis is the B, and it's close enough to oblate that its A and B rotational constants are of similar value. This results in a spectrum that is that of of a symmetric top with slightly broken symmetry. The unpaired electron, because there's an unpaired electron, you have the interaction of that unpaired electron with the molecular rotation and the magnetic moments of each of these 5 protons. At low frequency, the rotational transitions are split into many resolvable hyperfine components. It makes it a mess, and it's actually quite difficult to fully work with. The hyperfine structure collapses, though, as you go to increasingly high frequency. And in the millimeter wave, you end up with a simple rotational spectrum that has the spin doubling left over and is well described by a small number of rotational constants. This is an example of what you'd observe in the millimeter wave band. The top is the observed spectrum, and the bottom here is based on the predicted values. If you add the spin rotation, you end up with these nice doublets that you can see evident at the higher frequency from the band head. And you can see that once you overlay the line shape from the experimental line shape from the instrument, you have a nice match between the observed and the calculated. As I mentioned, at lower frequency, you end up having a hyperfine structure, which makes it a mess, but at higher frequency, that collapses and you end up with something that you can actually work with. These experiments started off, and here's the paper, using the Fourier transform microwave spectrometer. It has a range of 5 to 42 gigahertz. It uses a pulse nozzle, which is firing at 6 hertz, and produces a supersonic molecular beam on the order of Mach 2. The backing pressure behind the nozzle is 2.5 kilotorr, and you have a total flow of all gases at about 30 standard cubic centimeters per minute. The beam is rotationally cold at about 1 to 3 Kelvin, and we can also use a DC discharge shown here, 2 copper electrodes spaced by some Teflon spacers, to produce excited species or reactive species such as radicals and ions. And of course, this was used for this experiment. To search for the predicted fundamental frequency that occurs at about 9.2 gigahertz, they optimized on a closely related orthobenzene ring. It's a C6H4, so it's 2 hydrogen atoms that have been homolytically cleaved. Ultimately, the phenyl radical was found within less than 1% from the predictions, and there were a series of closely spaced magnetic lines. Again, these were located less than 1% from the predictions. In all, in the Fourier transform microwave spectrometer, 14 rotational transitions between 9 and 40 gigahertz were located. These were used to come up with rotational constants that could then predict the line frequencies at higher frequency. To actually observe those, they used a free space millimeter wave absorption spectrometer, which operates from 70 to 400 gigahertz. It's able to be cooled using liquid nitrogen. There's coils that are wrapped and liquid nitrogen's flowed. The cell for this experiment in particular was cooled to 220 Kelvin, and it uses a low pressure DC discharge. Within the cell are electrode rings, and the pressure within the cell is about 4 millitorr, and a current of about 75 milliamps was what was used to discharge. A gas flow that consisted of 2 standard cubic centimeters of argon plus either normal or the fully deuterated benzene were used to flow in the cell at a constant flow, and magnetic modulation was used to simplify the spectrum to remove any non-magnetic lines from the spectrum, which I'll show you here. The top spectrum is an example of an unmodulated spectrum. So you can see quite a number of lines are present, and this is especially evident at, say, the higher frequency. When you modulate and you end up subtracting the modulated from the unmodulated spectrum, you end up removing the non-magnetic interlopers. And as I mentioned, you can really see this at the higher frequency from the band head. You end up with nice little doublets, which are, of course, the spin rotation from the molecule. The additional benefit to the magnetic modulation is because you're subtracting one spectrum from another, you end up with also a baseline removal. Again, just to give you an idea of how this compares to the orthobenzene that was used to tune up on, the lines of phenyl radical were about 5 times weaker than those of orthobenzene as observed using the millimeter wave experiment here. When you factor in the 2.5 factor in dipole moment and the splitting that you'd get, or reduction of intensity because of the spin doubling, which is a factor of 2, you end up coming up with a comparable mole fraction, which I've shown here between the molecules. So you end up producing about the same for either one. Now, the phenyl detection at high frequency in the millimeter wave, the normal was detected within 50 megahertz of the predictions that I mentioned for the rotational constants that were based on the FTM measurements. The deuterated was located within 0.07% of the predicted isotopic shift. In all, for the normal, 62 rotational lines between 150 and 330 gigahertz were found for the normal, and 50 were measured for the fully deuterated. This is a rotational energy level diagram just showing you, all of the Fourier transform lines that were located, and about a quarter of those that were observed with the millimeter wave band. So, of course, it starts at the fundamental and goes up for the Fourier transform, and the millimeter wave started at about 21, a J equals 21, and went up. Now, shown here are only the limiting oblate index, that's K, and spin doubling is not shown. Also, in that paper, there was this nice little diagram showing here, starting off with a benzene discharge, or, obviously phenyl radical was produced, but a variety of other species have been assumed to be produced. And highlighted here in red, the ones that are highlighted in red are ones that have been detected from a benzene discharge using rotational spectroscopy on discharge on benzene. Now, also with the instrument, due to the high signal to noise of the normal phenyl lines, initiated a search plus or minus 2C in frequency, that's the rotational constant, see if you can observe other lines that are similar character. So perhaps 13C in natural abundance. A magnetic feature was found that was slightly weaker than phenyl, but with similar spectral structure. Now, subsequent searches were able to locate other series of lines and ultimately determine a C accurately. And the preliminary analysis using Hartree-Fock calculations indicate that these are the nu equals 7 and 8 vibrational modes. Of course, this needs further analysis, which will continue soon, and hopefully we can pin this down. Now, why revisit work that's already been done? Well, initially, the only isotopic work was that of the fully deuterated. And of course, this isn't enough to actually obtain a very accurate structure. So we'd like to, this is a prototypical reactive ring, and the isotopic work will yield an accurate structure, of course, giving you the bond lengths and angles. To do this, we determined that we'd like to do the 13C. There are 4 equivalent positions. There's ortho, meta, para, and then the radical position. And the deuterated, there are 3 inequivalent positions. There are ortho, meta, and para. These measurements, obtaining a structure at high accuracy, is useful to properly calibrate the accuracy of quantum chemical approaches that are used to predict a lot of these features. Also, obtaining the Fermi contact constant would give you the degree of unpaired electron localization within the ring, which can also be of importance to the predictions, the calculations. So again, we used the free space millimeter wave absorption spectrometer. You've already seen these here, but conditions slightly changed, namely because we had to work with expensive samples. In the end, we decided to not cool the instrument as much. This sacrificed a little bit of intensity, but there was some worry about going too low. The benzene melting point is 278.5, and so we didn't want to go too much lower for fear of freezing out the sample in the inner walls. We also used the same low pressure discharge, running about 20 millitorr of gas and using the same discharge conditions. In the end, we used 4 standard cubic centimeters of argon and about 1/4 of that of benzene. The 13C is ridiculously expensive, shown here $15,000 US for 30 grams. And we were roughly using about 5 gram aliquots would last you about 6 hours. So we were running at about $2,500 a day. So in order to make that last, we cut that by diluting it in normal benzene. The deuterated was used pure. Of course, that's also a little bit expensive, but not nearly so much as the single 13C isotopic benzene. The theory to back this up came from John Stanton at University of Texas at Austin. These are quantum chemical calculations using the C4 program package. He uses high-level coupled cluster calculations. We corrected for the effects of zero-point vibrational motion, in which he used second-order vibrational perturbation theory at CCSDT level and CC-PV-TZ basis set. Right now, more up-to-date calculations are in the works, and so the information that I'll show you here should be improved. Now, the original normal Phenyl work for the determination of the rotational constants, the original lines were just flagged. So that means, more or less the frequency was eyeballed, which is good enough to a certain degree, but we decided to revisit that and see if we can improve upon the determination of these constants. Now, as I mentioned, the instrument, because we use a frequency modulation to suppress the 1/f noise, this results in a second derivative line shape, a second derivative of a Lorentzian line shape. And so we fit each of the lines of the spectra with this line shape in order to increase the accuracy. And shown here, you can see, directly compare, these are the revisited values after the fitting, and these are the ones that were determined just by eye. And so you can see a number, we got increased accuracy, more decimal places. And again, this is an experimental spectrum shown up top. This is in particular for the IPSO, which is the radical position, 13C at the radical position. You can see how, you can eyeball a frequency, but if we fit it with the exact line shape, this aided in actually being able to determine, in this case, you can see this feature here at higher frequency was actually a blend of two spin doublets, which was kind of hard to determine if you didn't actually have the line shape fit to the spectra. In the end, this ended up being the Fermi contact that we were able to determine from fitting for this particular isotopolog shown there. In the end, these are all the rotational constants that were fit for each of the species. So again, here are the normal ones that we revisited. The deuterated, fully deuterated, were not revisited. These are the original ones from the paper that I showed you here. But we determined the single deuterium isotopic substitute of the ortho, the meta, and the para positions. Shown with stars here are values that were not determined, that were kept fixed at the calculated constants. And then also for the 13C, we were able to determine the ortho, meta, para, and iso, measure the iso spectra. At the bottom, you can see the number of lines measured for each species. So for the normal, we had 62, 50 for the fully deuterated, and you can see for the remainder of the species. It's remarkable to see what accuracy, or I guess to what degree we're able to determine these constants. Shown here in parentheses are the error in the final digits of each constant. Also, what I'd like to highlight, actually in the next one, this is a slide or a picture taken from Nesbitt et al. Again, as I mentioned, we determined the Fermi contact constant. Ours is 500, which is in somewhat, relatively good agreement with that calculated by Puzzarini et al. At 250 megahertz. But this indicates that you do have at the radical center, you do have, the single-filled orbital, which is nodelessness, which is nodeless and in plane is indicative of a sigma-type radical, which no longer has a pure sp2 hybridization. Once you remove that hydrogen, you lose the pure sp2 hybridization and end up with partial sp mixing to generate the sigma radical. Of course, to determine a semi-empirical equilibrium constant, we, as I mentioned earlier, took the vibrational corrections. So shown here are the constants generated once the vibrational corrections are taken into account. And you can see an improvement, the parameter here showing the planarity of the actual molecule. These are the initial experimental values. A value closer to 0 will indicate a very flat or planar molecule. And so there's also a bit of a sort of overestimation with the vibrational corrections, and so these will hopefully improve once we get new values from John Stanton. Sorry, the first ones were for the deuterated species, and these here you can also see again for the 13C positions. This is a slide from Barney et al. And these are the sort of so-called Barney diagrams. And you can see here for CH3, of course, you'd have the 120 degree angles and the bond lengths listed here between the C and the H. As you remove an H, you have two options depending on what electronic state you end up with and how many electrons you end up leaving on the single carbon atom. Now, if you look at sort of the equivalent for the phenyl, you remove the hydrogen atom, you end up with this structure immediately. If that then has time to relax, what's predicted is that at the radical position, you'll have a larger bond angle between the CCC than that at the para position. So the para position you'll end up with a smaller bond angle relative to that from normal benzene. This is the end structure that we determined, and what it's telling you is shown here are the parameters that we determined for each of the CH bond distances and the CC bond distances, along with the angles. You can compare it here to the ring shown here. So the CH2 would be this CH2 bond distance. You can see the 612 bond angle is shown here. Sorry, here. These here are a variety of calculations that have been done. These come from Barney's work, and so you can see how our values compare to the calculated values for each of the structure parameters. In all, you can see the remarkable precision that was obtained by the work that we did. This is the fit results from structural parameters that are least squares optimized to calculate the best fit structure. There were 24 rotational constants that were used, and they reproduced to a very remarkable deviation. And here you can see, if you'd like to compare to normal benzene, of course, the changes in the CH bond distances or the CC bond distances. Of course, the benzene has a 120 degree angle between the CCC bonds. Now, this is a slide taken from Weaver et al. From a talk at Green Bank, and the aim is to what needs to be done to search for these types of species in the interstellar medium. And of course, they point out that laboratory rotation spectra are required. Now, to observe phenyl in space, and benzene's already been observed, is phenyl to follow? The hyperfine structure, as I mentioned, collapses at higher frequency. So in a deep astronomical search, it'll become simplified. You don't have to worry about the hyperfine structure. Now, of course, you have to propose what sort of production routes would form benzene in order to determine where you'd like to search for it. A variety of routes have been formed, depending, of course, on what part of the space you'd look or expect to find it. Everything from electron recombination with protonated benzene, benzene photodissociation in the ultraviolet, propargyl dimerization, reaction of C4H3 with acetylene, and of course, phenyl production and combustion processes has been pointed out is analogous to aromatic hydrocarbon formation in carbon-rich stellar envelopes. For the future direction, what we'd like to do is use a new, to our lab, chirp pulse Fourier transform microwave spectrometer. It uses a chirp pulse that's generated by an arbitrary waveform generator, 20 gigasample per second. A chirp pulse is, of course, just a short frequency sweep about a microsecond long. That chirped pulse is then upconverted by a phase-locked dielectric resonator oscillator at 18.99 gigahertz, and then amplified by a traveling wave tube amplifier before it's broadcast into our cavity. In the cavity, we have 3 valves that'll introduce the mixture, the gas mixture, and the free induction decay is then measured by a second horn and processed by a 20 gigahertz oscilloscope at 100 gigasample per second to then acquire the FID and result in a Fourier transform spectrum. The current operation of this instrument, second time, yours is going to be a charm, right? Current operation is 8 to 18 gigahertz, but that's soon to change by adding a 2 to 8 gigahertz and 8 to 26 gigahertz capability. Now, the idea is to introduce complex polar aromatic mixtures, and you can see the evolution as a function of discharge conditions or reaction mixture conditions, but you can also, since for certain species that you'd expect sort of harmonicity in the spectrum, it'd be a piece of cake, essentially, so to speak, to see these all at one time due to the wide capability, the wide frequency capability that this instrument has, compared to the Fourier transform microwave spectrometer, which has to step by frequency 400 kilohertz at a time. This, the 8 to 18 gigahertz has lower resolution and lower sensitivity, but in the end, it buys you out with a larger bandwidth, which might make it interesting to see how this would impact the search for these types of species. So in conclusion, we've conducted the experimental work on phenyl radical using isotopic substitution, single deuterated, and 13C. We reanalyzed the original spectra to give higher accuracy so that we can pinpoint the determined constants, which will then, of course, be used in the determination of the structure. We coupled this with theory, the high-level coupled cluster calculations by John Stanton et al., which included vibrational corrections. And this is all to aim towards a precise structure determination where we use the structural parameters that are least squares optimized and we result in a semi-equilibrium structure. This, of course, serves as a computational benchmark for larger and more complex systems, and other polar systems are to follow. I'd like to warn you once again that these results although they are very close to final, they actually finished up this past week, the experimental portion, they're still preliminary. So new calculations are in the pipeline, and the analysis continues, so improvements are bound to follow. I'd like to thank everyone here, that's you, and the co-authors on this work, including Kyle Crabtree, Jerry O'Connor, which was as has been put, we took him as a slave to some degree. John Stanton, of course, to do the calculations, Mike McCarthy, and Carl Gottlieb, who did a lot of the original work and helped me considerably with the millimeter wave experiments, and of course these funding agencies. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Questions for Oscar? I've got two. When a lot of your numbers, you generally don't have any uncertainties associated with them.
I realized that when I was
1%?
speaking. No, actually, those I didn't get to calculate the uncertainties based on the structure that I determined. I ended up having to use these dummy atoms to input the Z matrix, and in order to determine the values for, say, the bond lengths or bond angles, you have to calculate those. So I calculated the angles, or actually I used another generated the coordinates that then I can input into Gaussian to determine the values or view the structure and see what values. But I didn't go back and get to determine the errors for each of those. So that will be done.
Okay, but you must have an idea about what they are to know that they're
so
significantly different.
Are you referring to?
Yeah, I mean,
say like this guy here.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, so you can compare to the others and see what sort of accuracy results in the others, and I would imagine it's very close to those.
Yeah.
That's one part of the problem.
Yeah. So less 0.1% is yes. Okay. My other question was about your chirp pulse instrument.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the status is, and is it funded? Is it built?
Sure. So right now the current capability is from 8 to 18 gigahertz, but in-house we have the 18 to 26 capability that needs to be added, and the 2 to 8 is in the pipeline. Is that correct, Mike? So to speak?
Yes, it's in the pipeline.
It's funded. It's going to happen.
It takes 6 months to get this powerful amplifier.
Okay.
But another one of the co-authors, Kyle Crabtree, has been working on a variety of the aspects on the instrument. I mean, it's been used already, and publications come out, and so it's bound to improve.
Okay.
But it's already functioning.
Sounds good to me. Other real questions?
Ralph? A technical question. Once the chip pulse system is in operation, how easy would it be to change the discharge source you have now for another source, for example, a pyrolytic reactor, to study chemical reactions? For example, the same experiment we do at the ALS by photoionization, but now to detection of the speed pulse microwave spectroscopy that we actually performed. So would this be possible from the signal to noise, or it is not? Because I never worked with microwaves before.
I would imagine that it's possible, but I'm not familiar with what other sources.
How much space do we have?
I'm sorry?
I mean, how much space do we have to change the pulse source?
I would imagine it's feasible. It just needs, mechanically, each nozzle is introduced into a chamber orifice, and I mean that has some distance, and the nozzles are retractable. You can optimize its positioning to optimize the expansion into the spectrometer and sort of try to get it to wherever you'd be making or probing whatever you make along the axis of the actual cavity. So I would imagine you'd be able to recreate that using another type of source. But as for the signal to noise, I'm not familiar with how feasible that would be, I guess.
Shouldn't be worse. I mean, usually it's pyrolysis, right? They're much more efficient in some sense.
Modulated pyrolysis combined with chemical reactions. So we like with benzene heating up the radical and we see this in the hydrocarbon carrier gas for the reaction. So typically we get maybe 14, 10 to 15 reactants per 2 centimeter.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So I mean, the thing is, discharges you blow everything up and recreate whatever, right? Versus this is something more rational approach. Therefore, often it's more efficient.
We will check out the lab tomorrow.
Right.
Any other questions? If not, let's thank Oscar and all the other speakers.